And we are live. This is an after show. Some of you saw us on Steve McRae's channel, the NonSequitur channel. Steve McRae and Cheshire Vic, or
Yeah.
Victoria.
There's a number of names, right?
And there was David Neff and Dr. Jonathan McClatchy.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about the show is kind of making fun of a particular young earth creationist educational material.
A really bad one.
Yeah, it was bad. And it's kind of difficult. It's kind of painful, and I couldn't help but laugh and mock along the way, but then I'd alternate and saying, this is tragic, because these are my people that are being taught this stuff. And it was really painful. And I need to, before I move forward, for those of you who watch the show, I need to clarify some things, because how it is, sometimes you could say something and you didn't get the chance to clarify. I said I don't begin with the Bible when I'm teaching. What I meant to say is I don't begin with the Bible as a starting premise when I start to teach science and creationism. And sometimes I just need to clarify what I was trying to say, and it didn't quite come out right. And people are horrified by that. But let me just share. Look at John 10:38. Jesus said, if you don't believe me, believe the works. So Jesus is identifying situations where you may not have the Christian worldview or you're doubting it. And so he says to study the works. And then in Acts chapter 17, Paul begins his appeal to the pagans with a pagan worldview. It doesn't mean that you're rejecting Christianity. I just needed to clarify that. And this will actually kind of spill over into kind of how we teach the next generation of creationist children. And that's kind of, that's kind of where we are. And Jesus Garcia here as what's on the docket. Well, we're just going to talk a little bit about our recollections and reflections on the show, and then how we teach young earth creationism, and kind of some thoughts about that. I had no idea how this is going to, I absolutely had no idea how this is going to transpire. So
I hope you're happy with how it transpired.
Yeah.
Good.
I did not know that David Neff was raised up in this stuff. And now he is, I believe he's an atheist. He's definitely not a creationist.
Oh, he, as far as I know, he's an atheist. I believe he said that to me. And if he hasn't, then I apologize. But as far as I know, he's not a Christian. And I think he's sort of a poster child for, like, if you want to preserve Christianity and keep people in the church, then the way that ACE, Accelerated Christian Education, is doing it is not the way to go.
And speaking of...
David, don't apologize, man. You were great. I mean, like, look, when Steve first started and we didn't think you were going to be there, I was honestly disappointed. So any amount of you being there was like, it's like a blessing, right? It's like extra stuff that I wasn't expecting. So.
Oh, so before I move on, so for those of you who came from the NonSequitur Show, thank you for joining. And people on my channel know who I am. I'm Salvador Cordova, some random guy. So DapperDino, why don't you introduce yourself to my audience?
Okay. Well, first, I feel like if you've been following Sal for any length of time, you should already know who I am, because I'm the guy who went on about, like, first and second century Christian history on Sal's channel. But I run a channel that primarily focuses on countering the claims of young earth creationism, which is a little bit odd then for me to be here, I suppose. But also, I cover a lot of other things. I've covered New Age nonsense. I've covered some medical craziness like anti-mask and homeopathy, which is complete nonsense. I've also covered some things that atheists get badly wrong frequently online, like thinking that the Council of Nicaea decided which Gospels were in the Bible or something like that, which is just total nonsense. Or thinking that Constantine declared that Jesus was God in the 4th century, which, again, complete nonsense. So I cover a fairly wide range of topics, although it is the case that evolution and the age of the Earth are my focus, and I am staunchly on the side of mainstream science. But I hope that doesn't turn you against me too much, because I feel like I'm a reasonably nice guy, and I don't bite, especially over the internet. So, and that's despite my razor sharp fangs, or well, teeth. I don't have fangs technically.
So Jesus said, "What's your view on this?" So if that was directed at me, I believe we didn't evolve from ape-like creatures. DapperDino believes.
I do. Well, so I would say, first of all, so there's a few things. One is, if you look at what makes an ape, according to the classification scheme that has been used since the time of Linnaeus, humans are apes in the same way that dogs are mammals, or that lizards are reptiles.
Yeah.
Now, there's a separate question, which is, do humans share common ancestry with other apes? I am firmly in the yes camp, but that is technically a separate question from, are humans apes? So, do humans share a common ancestry with other apes, and are humans apes, are two questions that are separate. And I can understand why you might say yes to one and no to the other. So, yeah.
Now, I'll tell you what I'm dying to ask you, and it actually relates also to David. People wonder why sometimes I'm so friendly to individuals like David and yourself. I came from a evolutionary background. I was sent to school to learn about God's creation under evolutionary teachers. Dr. Sanford did not send me to Dinosaur Adventureland to learn.
Sorry.
I know that's another swipe at the Lord's Anointed. I'm sorry.
The Lord's Anointed. So you're going to kill me here. Come on. I have to be able to breathe.
I'm losing subscribers because I say stuff like that. But honestly, Dr. Sanford paid out of his own pocket. He said, "I want you to study there." And I told him I'm studying under evolutionary biologists. He said, "Good." He said, "That's good." And one of them was a staff employee of Eugene Koonin. He's like the top evolutionary biologist at the NIH. And he would be very, very senior, on the planet as an evolutionary biologist too. 400 peer-reviewed papers. So it's
lot.
like, yeah. Well, he has a lot of staff members. He has a staff of 30 evolution.
That helps.
Yeah, if you have a staff of 30 evolutionary biologists and you get to be like the co-author on each of the projects you authorize, you're going to make a lot of.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I mean, he's really good. Mm-hmm. And this will tie into what the topic of the night. So we know a little bit. So I take it David Neff was raised as a young Earth creationist in a very fundamentalist background or something. And
yeah.
So I wanted to add, I mean, if it's not too personal, or am I confusing you with someone? Were you a young Earth creationist at one time?
Are you asking David or me?
You.
I was actually on my channel. I have a series that's irregular because I don't always have a guest for it, but it's called Leaving Young Earth Creationism, and I am the first interviewee on that. So in all the subsequent ones, I'm the interviewer, but in the first one, I'm actually the interviewee. And I was raised as a young Earth creationist. I was one up until, so it's been a while. So I want to say junior year of high school, I think. But like, you can't quote me on that because like that time is now fuzzy, having been several. I don't want to age myself, but like 150 million years or so. So
yeah. Okay. So I mean, I was reluctant to ask because it is kind of a personal thing, but if I
it's public.
And I wasn't sure if I was confusing you with your guests on Leaving Young Earth Creationism. So I should be able to go to your channel and find your interview with yourself or something, right?
So a friend of mine who goes by Dead Kennedy in Space, although in that one we went with Kevin because of it being also a bit of a memorial for someone who had just recently passed away. So we thought that dead Kennedy in space would be a bit disrespectful. So we went with Kevin for that. But yeah, so he interviewed me about it. And then subsequent episodes have been me interviewing other people, including, interestingly enough, my brother, whom up until not long before that interview, I didn't know was no longer a young Earth creationist.
Wow.
So,
no,
yeah.
I really, hey, Beethoven.
Oh, it's Beethoven, no relation. You got to make sure you say no relation.
Oh, sorry, no relation.
Right, because he and the other Hovens you might have heard of, they're not related.
I'm sorry to be, if people have detected that I've not been happy with the young Earth creation community, it's true.
Oh, there's a lot to be not happy with, apart from my scientific disagreements.
And people know my story that I nearly left the Christian faith, but there's just so much garbage that goes on in Christendom, and people are like, "Can you do anything but complain, Sal?" And I'm like, "Okay, so I've been threatened with arrest and jail at my local church."
Yeah.
And then they threatened a Christian mother with arrest and jail. And there's just like no end to drama. I'm just like, and I feel like, and this ties to Christian education, a lot of it, unfortunately, and I see the way they do it in church, there's a lot of indoctrination and shaming. So if I start to express that I doubt something or I'm struggling, you get shamed.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the things that actually kicked off my investigation into things like evolutionary biology. There was, and now this is kind of overlapping with my interview that was for my own Leaving Earth Creationism. But when I was in youth group in a non-denominational evangelical church, and yeah, Ben Hovind says, I left YEC because people like Uncle Kent, no relation, but I haven't left Christianity, nor will I. And actually, that's been the stance of a lot of the people who have had on Leaving Earth Creationism, is that they're still Christians. I've also had a lot of people who aren't, so it does vary. But anyway, my church youth group staged a creation evolution debate. But of course, they ran into the problem that literally no one in the church was actually pro-evolution, so they had to get someone to play devil's advocate. And the person who they picked was me, because I had the reputation as like, the brainy kid. So like, you can probably hack it as the pretend evolutionist. But the response I got from putting forth like extremely weak arguments, because I mean, even if I was the brainy kid, I wasn't an evolutionist. I didn't have all the best arguments. But even extremely weak arguments was met not with like counter arguments or polite discourse, but with like extreme heckling from the audience. And so I was like, well, there's got to be something wrong with this whole situation, because there had to be an intervention from one of the like adult youth group leaders to say like, hey, and my first name is public, so Tim isn't actually, an evolutionist. He's just playing devil's advocate as like a favor to us. So maybe don't be really mean to him for this debate. And then after the debate, I was like, well, gee, that's a really weird response if it's so obvious that creationism is true. Because even at that age, I knew that like just being angry isn't an argument. So that was one of the first times that I was prompted to actually look into these arguments more seriously. Hey, Andrew Kaufman.
Hi, yeah. Hey, Andrew Kaufman. And if I missed someone here, apologies. I'm not really good at running the controls at the same time as when I'm doing a live stream. But I think, the business model, quote unquote, for a lot of Protestant evangelical churches was, let's build an insular community, and we shame people, we bully them, and we indoctrinate them. But once the general culture started to become a little more secular, as it grew more secular, people are like, well, we don't need that. We can find another social circle to support us and comfort us and support us.
I also want to say that my church was not overall like an abusive, horrible place. Like overall, it was a positive experience for me growing up. I had a lot of really good friends, and a lot of really good like adult role models and stuff like that. So I don't want to pretend that the whole experience was awful. But yes, I do acknowledge what you're saying. That yeah, there's some serious problems there.
Well, you know, I mean, social structures are very powerful, and I don't remember who I was sharing it with on my channel, but I said, you just look at the gangs, and I mean, that's an extreme example, like the Hells Angels. There's a guy who goes to my church, one of my churches, and he used to hang out with the Hells Angels. He said, yeah, when they gather, they call it church. And I said, there's kind of a brotherhood and camaraderie that just bonds people. They just kind of need that. And church can be a way to fulfill that. So whether you actually confess the creeds, sometimes a lot of people who don't want to admit it, that's not the real reason they're there.
Yeah.
And there was actually a poll done on why people go to church. And God was like only 10% of the reasons. It's really interesting. It's I wish I had it handy, but I'm just like, yeah, that describes what I really experienced now, because it makes sense. It's like, okay, if you start to dissent, you get a social reaction. You don't get an intellectual discussion. And that's what I was not understanding. And now it's becoming clearer.
Actually, that reminds me of another time that I saw something going on at my church that I thought was weird or strange or it didn't make sense to me. And the answers that I got were completely inadequate, which was that, my church, like a lot of Protestant churches, well, okay, I want to say that a lot of non-traditional Protestant churches, there was a communion service every month. And I don't remember which month of the year, or which week of the year. I can't talk. Which week of the month? There we go. I got it eventually. They did it on, but it doesn't matter. Because what I remember is, they passed around the matzah that they had said a prayer over, and the grape juice, and then there was this whole big thing about not actually drinking and eating until you were ready, and they were all reciting about Bible verses about how if you partake of the flesh and blood of Christ, and when you're not ready or you're not at peace with your brothers and sisters in Christ, then that'll bring a curse upon you. All these things, right? And so, to me, that meant that this eating and drinking of these things was a really, really important thing, because we're talking about like curses and whatnot if you don't do it right. And then afterwards, I watched as someone in the church just poured all the unused grape juice down the drain in a sink that just went to the sewer. And I was thinking to myself, like, that seems like a really big change in how we're treating these things. Because if you had given any one of these little plastic cups to someone during the service, and this person had consumed it inappropriately or done anything inappropriate with it, you would have said that would have brought a curse on them. But now we're just dumping it down a sink. And now, look, I do think that you can probably construct arguments that are coherent that make that a reasonable thing to do. I'm not currently arguing as to whether or not that's the case. But what I will say is that when I asked questions about that, the responses I got were not adequate. And so that's actually one of the things that made me suspicious of sort of evangelical Protestantism as a whole.
Yes, because it's very hard for people to say, I don't know, or I could be wrong about this. It's like,
oh yeah.
And so people wonder why, I might show up on a show with Steve McRae and other people, as long as it's civil. There are people that I had banned from the channel that are atheists and even creationists. But if I feel they're attacking me personally and doing a lot of mockery, it's like, no, this is not going to work.
Look, Styles a stand-up guy. If you're going to attack him personally, you got a problem with me too, man.
So, thank you, brother.
You're welcome.
But it, I guess, sometimes we tend to look through the lens of how we feel we've been treated throughout life. And I feel that when I've been going through some of these conservative churches, it felt more like indoctrination sessions, and that really rubbed me wrong, because when I was, and now I'm realizing, and it's sad to say it, there tends to be a lot of this. Oh, well, like not tomorrow. Oh, we got to advertise this. I'm going to be on Creation Myths channel tomorrow.
Nice.
I'm going to be on Dr. Dan's channel and Ask Me Anything. So
really, I didn't know that. Dr. Dan's been holding out on me.
Yeah, this week I had a chance to make the rounds. It began because I was making a lot of YouTube appearances the last week because I had free time because I was homebound because it's really icy around here. Now, if I had like a SUV, I probably could have been driving more, but I have a little Civic, which fits me well because I don't have very good depth perception and I need a little car.
Okay.
How these people are able to drive these minivans or trucks, I don't get it. I barely passed my pilot medical in the section that they measured depth perception. Mine is just like off the charts bad.
So the real answer is come to a place like the Valley of the Sun in Arizona where sub-zero temperatures are a once a decade thing. And by sub-zero, I mean sub-zero Celsius. So below freezing. It's a once in a decade phenomenon.
Yes. And so I was just saying I did not like all the bullying. And there are times when I was hurting emotionally. I mean, just being a human being, you have tragedies in your life. And so you're going to ask, it's really hard for me to believe in God because I see all the problems around me.
I mean, look, there's a reason the problem of evil has been the thing that people have argued the most about with God for a long time.
Right. But as you were pointing out, it's the reaction I got. If someone said, "That's a good question, Sal, I don't know," I would have found that reasonable. Yeah. But then to start saying, the problem with you, Sal, is you don't trust the Lord enough, or something like that, or there must be sin in your life. And I'm just
that's the one I hate the most.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a tiny bit crass, and I hope it's forgivable. But one of the things that Kent Hovind says a lot is that you only accept the evolutionary worldview or whatever because of your lifestyle. And what myself and some friends have translated that as you only believe in evolution because you're horny. We actually have it on the Kent Hovind debate bingo cards that we share between each other. And it's like, look, dude, I can't say no one, but no one I've ever interacted with has been convinced of the truth of evolution because of like their sexual preferences, which is the obvious implication when he says it.
Yes, absolutely. I was offended when I heard Tim Keller's, guy was asking him real tough questions about Christianity. And he said, "Yeah, who are you sleeping with?"
Yeah,
I was livid when I heard that account. I said, "You loser."
Yeah. And I'm glad that you don't go there because it's terrible. Yeah,
Tim Keller's not one of my favorite people anyway. But I was livid. I said, because when I was going through all that, it had nothing to do with that,
Yeah,
it had nothing to do with that. I mean, yeah, I have my flaws. I shared like 30 years ago. I fell in love with a girl that was married. I mean, that was 30 years ago. I mean, that doesn't make it. But, all right, but it's different than when you really had a sincere question, because I wanted to believe in Christianity and in creation. I wanted them to give me inspiration to kind of keep enduring. It wasn't because I was trying to look for an excuse to leave, because if I really wanted to just leave, I'd leave,
Right. It's not that hard to do. You just stop.
It's not that hard to do. You don't have to go to your pastor and say, just prove to me that Christianity is true, otherwise I'll leave. You just leave. It's that easy.
There's no exit interview for Christianity.
Yeah. So I was livid when I hear that. And I said, you're just going to change the subject. You're going to do everything but try to answer the questions. So after, that's why I was kind of sensitive to a show like what we had tonight. And I said, I've often said this and people don't like me saying it. I said, the evangelical churches over the last 50 years have been perfect atheist factories. It's because the way you treat people and, I said, no wonder they flock outside of the church, because they can find people that'll treat them a lot better than they get treated in the church.
Well, okay, I want to bring that around to Cindy Lincoln, because that's been what's happening to her. And for people who might be watching who don't know, Cindy Lincoln is the third partner of Kent Hovind. And look, she requested that there not be a legal marriage. And I am okay with the idea of having a religious marriage that isn't legally recognized by the state. I think that the legal recognition and religious recognition are separate things. And I don't want to get into things like divorce and widowhood and annulment, like whatever. I'm just going to say that Kent Hovind and Cindy Lincoln, it's his ex-wife as far as they're both concerned. Okay.
Yep. In their minds, they were married.
Right. And I am not going to dispute this fact, because it's not my place, especially on the DapperDino channel, who very much does not take religious positions or even political positions. So as far as I'm concerned, okay, fine, they're married. But he has been convicted in a court of law of abusing her physically. Now, the case is on appeal, and we'll see what happens. And if it is in fact overturned, then I will stop saying that he's a convicted spouse abuser. But right now, he's convicted of physically abusing his former spouse. And when this happened and she left Dinosaur Adventureland and everything, it was not primarily, or even at all at first, Christians who reached out to her to give her a voice, to lend their platform to her, to offer her their condolences, their sympathies, their time. It was primarily non-believers, or in the case of myself, someone who doesn't declare his stance but is strongly against many of the scientific points that she has. And it's really bothering myself and her, and I believe Sal, that there has not been stronger Christian support for her, because this is a Christian woman who's been horribly abused by not just her own account. There's corroboration for this, and there's court, decisions that say, yes, she was horribly abused. And the Christian response has basically been like, well, Ken's sort of our guy, so you must be in the wrong. And I find that unconscionable, and I think it's connected to that same kind of dynamic.
Yeah, and they're, it's kind of hard to tease apart everything, but I've often violated the so-called 11th commandment. Thou will not criticize another Christian or another creationist publicly, and I've done a lot of that.
Do you remember that whole Council of Jerusalem in the book of Acts of the Apostles? There was a whole lot of criticizing of fellow Christians there. So I'll tell you what, criticizing your fellow Christians is entirely biblical, because otherwise there would not have been a Council of Jerusalem. Interesting
look at that. And so let me just, to clarify my position on Cindy Lincoln and the abuse, the alleged abuse. I said, you know what?
It's proven in court. It's convicted. You don't have to say alleged right now.
Well, I did point out that, that's what the courts ruled. I said, even independent of that, you just don't treat your wife a certain way. You don't tape record her when she asks you to stop taping. You don't smirk and laugh at her when she's obviously in distress. And I pointed out, I said, okay, so Kent, this is the fourth time around in 5 years. This just doesn't look good. And there are cases of Christians who had, like William Carey, a missionary, his wife went insane, but he stuck with her for 13 years, and he's been commended for that. I said, if you want to be a role model, Kent, you stick by your woman. And that's kind of what I was just saying. I said, even on that basis, it's it just doesn't look good. But my heart went out to her because she seemed sincere, and it bothered me that people would come on my channel and say, don't criticize the Lord's anointed. I said, what do you want to say about, that was the same attitude with Ravi Zacharias, who had raped women, had used his money and influence to build a harem and use donations. And it's like, okay, so now that he's dead, you're going to call it out. Where were all the people that might have been in position to see something wrong and do something about it? You don't give a guy these huge discretionary accounts and he doesn't have any accountability on donated money. If it were something he earned on his own, sure. But, I've seen this happen, and I see it happening in my church right now. It's like, don't criticize the pastor. He's the Lord's anointed. And it's like, okay, do I have to point out now that this has continued? He's using armed security to threaten a young, beautiful Christian mother because she's asking questions. Armed security in the church to get her out when she showed up to a congregational meeting. And they did the same to me, and they could say, well, Sal's just a troublemaker. But to do that to a woman in front of her children, I said, this goes on too much. And it bothers me. And my heart went out to Cindy Lincoln. I said, let me just raise the bar real high as far as, proof of whether there was domestic violence or whatever. I said, let's just raise it real high. How about the standards of just being a decent person to your wife, looking after her, her finances, making sure she's okay, not trying to humiliate her publicly. But
I
in
don't think
addition
you're
to
trying
that,
to humiliate her, and I don't think she does either.
I'm sorry.
I said I don't think you're trying to humiliate her, and I don't think she does either.
Yeah, but what Kent Hovind was doing was humiliating her publicly.
Absolutely.
And that's what I had a problem with. But then you have, like, they say when there's smoke, there's fire. When you have, I believe it's on record that there was a pedophile on Dinosaur Adventureland and their kids going there. It's like, did you do a background check? And then the callous behavior when another child had died and drowned, and he's handing out, it just doesn't smell right. And then, now he's on his fourth relationship. It just, it starts to add up. And I'm just like, there are other creationists out there that you can follow that have their science a lot better. Like,
yes, it's hard to get worse than Ken Hovind on science.
Yeah. And, I've lost viewership because it's like, oh, look at all the souls he's saving. And like, well, you could make the same case for Ravi Zacharias, and I loved his sermons, but you don't excuse his behavior. All the bad. Yeah.
Actually, even with the soul saving, the only way to conclude that Kent, I think, is on net saving souls is if you agree with his easy beliefism, once saved, always saved. If you actually think that the way to be saved in Christianity is to have a continuous walk with the Lord and to, stay steadfast in the faith and to work out your faith with fear and trembling, which, by the way, is a thing from the Bible. If you actually take that stuff seriously, then I don't think he's actually on net converting people to Christianity. So,
and it's really just, for me, we got to call out bad behavior at some point. We all fall short of expectations, but there's some point when you just feel enough is enough. And then on top of that, science is bad. Yesterday, I pointed out what I would consider an excellent scientist, in addition to John Sanford, John Gideon Hartnett. He's a physicist, 200 papers. He builds these sapphire clocks for the European Space Agency. So even though he's a young Earth creationist, he can contribute to making space probes and making very precise devices. And I'd say that's more someone, or Rob Stadler. These are people to look to as resources for your creationism, and also as role models. And I'm sorry to have to say that. Up until I heard your interview with changed it for me is when Cindy Lincoln appeared on your channel. I just happened to be dropping in.
I'm so glad that made that impact, because I am the look, before you got into touch with Cindy, she basically had essentially no Christian supporters.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart, because look, I love Cindy. Cindy is awesome. I disagree with Cindy about a lot of things, but there's a reason that I've stayed up with her all night for like 6-7 hours. It's because she's such a genuine person. She has a warm heart. She's actually interested in doing things like learning and taking other sides seriously. And also, I have a whole lot of sympathy, because she's been through just so much that I wouldn't wish on anyone.
Yeah.
And she's had so little support from her co-religionists. And I'm just like,
absolutely. Yeah.
It breaks my heart. Yeah, it really is.
And so, well, you know, I wander on your channel to see Chesh, but then there was Cindy there, and I heard just enough, only a few minutes of the interview, and it broke my heart. I'm like, so she's going on channels that are non-creationists, but because the creationists aren't supporting her, the Christians aren't supporting her. It really, that bothered my conscience. I said, Sal, if you're worth anything, you're going to stand up for her, because this will be a blight on the creationist community, that they don't call stuff out like that they don't come to the defense of someone who's defenseless. And I took a little bit of flack, not too much, thankfully.
Well, I'm glad, because I honestly would have expected you to take a whole lot.
Yeah, I think, I think with wife number 4 for Ken, it's just becoming hard to defend. And some guy, you can probably guess who, was saying, oh, well, look, Solomon had all these wives. I was just like,
okay, here.
Go ahead.
This is slightly connected. So, do you remember Jason Ezard?
Oh, yeah.
He's
probably watching, but go ahead.
Do you remember that time that he made that very thinly veiled threat to cut my head off?
Yeah.
Yeah, he showed up in my comments not that long ago, trying to gaslight me to pretend that never happened. Fortunately, I have the video uploaded on my alternate channel, Top Hats Off. So, yeah, it definitely happened. But I was just flabbergasted that then he's going to show up and be like, oh, no, that never happened. And it's like, what do you mean that never happened, man? I have the recording. What are you talking about? Like, you're just going to pretend that you never threatened my life? You didn't make up an even gayer version of In the Navy by the Village People, one of the most gay bands of all history. Yeah, no, those are things that happened. You don't get to pretend it didn't. And that's sort of the segment of YouTube, Young Earth Creationism, I just don't have any time for.
Yeah.
It's like, look, guys, we can disagree, but there are ethical lines you don't have to cross. And things like death threats, sexual harassment, threats of violence in general that aren't necessarily death threats, dishonestly editing videos, your own and others. Yeah, you don't have to do that stuff to advocate for Young Earth Creationism. And Sal, as far as I can tell, and I watch almost everything that you do, Sal. I've never seen you. I mean, it's not often that I catch it all right when it happens, but like I go back and I check. I take a look. There's very few of your videos that I haven't seen at least most of. And yeah, I have not seen you doing those things. And it's one of the reasons why, like I said to Steve McRae in sort of the after show chat that we had that wasn't live, that, yeah, you're at the top of my list for like, oh, hey, I need a Young Earth Creationist. Like, I'm going to recommend Sal as one of the top people, because Sal isn't going to be dishonest with me. He's not going to threaten anyone.
And I feel the same way with you.
Well, I hope I haven't threatened anyone. If I have, please let me know.
You're on the top of the list of your side.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, and see, I could see this is where we're headed is I'm trying to point out to the church is if you start treating your congregants a certain way, they're going to find decent people outside of the church to be with. And Cindy Lincoln's a great example. And I don't think that was because, I don't think that she was being treated that way because they're just trying to embarrass Kent. It's because, one, the people really welcomed her as a human being and really genuinely loved her. I mean, it's hard not to love someone like her as a human being.
If it were just about embarrassing Kent, I wouldn't spend significant amounts of time on the phone with her in situations where it's never going to go public, right? Like, Cindy Lincoln is an actual friend of mine. We have conversations that do not get aired. You don't hear about. There are plenty of things she's told me that I'm not about to make public because she would rather not. That's an actual human connection. I care about her, and she does about me because we're friends now.
Yeah.
And it's not about content. Because, look, if I wanted to embarrass Kent, I would read his dissertation. Spoiler alerts, I already am. I just broke Sal. So Sal, in case you don't know, I'm already 5 parts deep into reading his dissertation because, yes, I do want to embarrass Kent. One of his citations in his dissertation says, and I quote, KJV, get book title. That's a citation in his doctoral dissertation. Aw, thank you, Ben. I agree. And yeah, Ben says KJV, get title. Because that's a citation in his dissertation. That's what I do when I want to embarrass Kent. I just read out loud his dissertation because it would not get you a passing grade as an 8th grade book report. You would fail if you submitted that as an 8th grade book report. It's littered with spelling errors, formatting errors. There's no bibliography. There's no introduction. There's no thesis statement. What passes as a table of contents is in his first part. He doesn't even get to all the things that he says he's going to. He says he's going to get to these 16 chapters. I'm already way past the halfway point, and we're only on chapter 2 of the 16 he's promised. Spoiler alerts, he doesn't get to them. That's what I do when I want to embarrass Kent Hovind. What I don't do is talk to his ex on the phone for hours off air that you never hear about.
Yeah.
That's what I do because I care, because she's a human being who's been through things that no one should have to go through.
Yeah. And she's a wonderful person. So people are wondering, well, why are Dapper and I talking about this? It'll give insight to why I participated in the talk tonight and why I had a good time, because David Neff was recounting what he had gone through, and now he's an atheist and he's not a creationist. And it also made me think, because when Victoria asked me, what would, about what I think about this or that, I said, I actually never thought about it because most of the people I deal with are college level graduate students, professors, etc. And I've never thought about how to talk to the children. And I said, this is really difficult because for me as a Christian and a creationist, I want to pass on my faith, but yet I want to do it in a way that has integrity. So like when you have a definition for what evolution is and you say, oh, it's a false theory, I said, that's not a definition. And I was like, okay, how can we separate the kind of the secular from the religious? And I haven't quite figured that out, but what this is my feeling, is if you teach it right, you've given them a fair chance of believing. Because what obviously doesn't work is if you indoctrinate, and then they leave, kind of the church environment and find out how good it can feel to be in a secular environment where you're not judged, you're more accepted, and then you hear the other sides of the argument, then you can lose your faith. And what I've said, the best time to give the other side and to represent it as strongly as possible is when they are young and still under the parents' supervision through high school. Because I asked Nathaniel Jeanson, I said, how did you get through Harvard being a young earth creationist? How did your parents raise you up? He said, they taught me both sides of the argument since growing up. Whether you agree with Nathaniel or not, I was impressed by that because he did not follow the regular trajectory of what I see happen in church, where it's such an insular environment, and they'll say they're just so dismissive of the other side. I said, you do not. Okay, as a young earth creationist, I said, if you want to fight evolution and you want to teach your children to fight it, do not ever train them up to think it's going to be an easy fight. You never underestimate your opponent. You give them the respect that they're due, and you respect their intellect and their ability to confront your arguments. To be dismissive like that, you're just setting them up for failure because, to expose them to like a few debates with Kent Hovind and think it's going to be a cakewalk when you go on to university, you're just setting up to be slaughtered. I'm sorry. And so, go ahead.
If you base your faith on Kent Hovind's teaching, I mean, welcome to at least agnosticism. Because, look, if you have to think Kent Hovind is right in order to believe in God, well, spoiler alerts, Kent Hovind can't even defend the shape of the Earth against flat earthers because I've seen him try and he failed. It's that bad. Oh, yeah, and Ben Hovind says, for those who don't know, I left YEC about 4 or 5 years ago, and I thank God that I didn't leave the faith altogether. And I want to take a little bit of either credit or blame, depending on your circumstance and your position, for that, because a huge portion of Ben Hovind leaving Earth Creationism was our discussions. But one of the things I want to emphasize is at no point did I make this. Oh, did you guys know Sal is a pilot? Nice.
That was the airplane I flew once. It's aerobatic. So when you see me standing on top of an airplane, that was it.
Nice. But yeah, that's one of the things that I want to emphasize about my channel is my channel is not an atheist channel. It's not an anti-religious channel. It's not even a non-believing channel. I regularly have as guests various types of theists, non-theists of various stripes. I have people from Ben wanted to learn to be a pilot until he learned that he was afraid of heights. Yeah, that might be a problem. But yeah,
well, I'm actually afraid of heights. I'm going to point that out to him.
Oh, there you go. See, it doesn't have to be a barrier. But one of my pet peeves on my channel, and I actually just made a video of which this is a part, which is like rules for my channel if you want to interact with me. And one of them is you don't get to assume my religious stance. If you decide that I'm an atheist and you decide to continue to claim that, you're going to get banned from my channel because you don't have evidence to support that claim. And my channel is religiously neutral, which means that as a DapperDino, I'm religiously neutral. Now, okay, sure. The human behind this dinosaur avatar that you're seeing on screen has his own religious positions. But when I appear in the context of the DapperDino, I don't. I'm uninterested in that discussion. And so one of the things that really bugs me about the creation evolution debate is when people pretend that it's a debate between Christians and atheists. Because first, Christians aren't the only creationists. Second, atheists aren't the only anti-creationists. There's a reason I have Christians and Jews and Muslims on my channel. And it's because either they say things I want to disagree with, or they say things I agree with. I think, I'm trying to think, more often than not, my guest for my various shows that I do live is some kind of theist. It's not a huge majority, but it is a slight majority. And that isn't what comes up as far as like, oh yeah, but you're a theist, so we can ignore that. No. Like when I have Ben Hovind, who's my most frequent co-host, or frankly Maddie, who's also a Christian and is tied, I guess, for whatever second is with a whole bunch of other people. She's also a Christian. And yeah, Lee Spentner is a Jewish creationist. Look, one of the more common people I've had on to talk about Kent Hovind's dissertation is a Jewish convert. And yeah, she's definitely a theist, right? Like, you don't normally convert to Judaism without like some kind of marriage impending unless you actually believe in God, because it's not an easy or a fun process, right? So she's definitely a theist because no, she did not convert because of a marriage. She converted as a single person. And that's who I have on most, like, or at least tied for most often about Kent Hovind's crazy dissertation. So yeah, it's mostly, I'll be honest, it's mostly Christian creationists who accuse me of being an atheist or running an atheist testimony or channel. And I really hate it. And I said testimony because Smokey Saint's comment just came up and I read the word.
Well, Smokey, I wanted to thank you also for supporting my channel and also my defense of Cindy Lincoln. I'm going to get myself in trouble if I name some names, and you probably know who they are, of certain creationist YouTubers who've practically slobbered over Kent Hovind, and they act like they're competing to be the next Kent Hovind.
Matt Powell has that on lockdown, guys. You're not going to win.
So
Matt, the Air in Space Powell, as I like to call him, because of that one time that he seemed to indicate that there must be air in space because the sun is a ball of fire that must get oxygen from the air in space.
Is that Dr. Matt? Is that Dr. Matt Powell?
No, as far as I know, he's not currently claiming to be a doctor. Although Raw Matt is.
Raw Matt. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've heard Matt Powell refer to Raw Matt as Dr. Raw Matt. The guy who, I will remind everyone, said that Probanignathes, a fossil synapsid, didn't have molars in a blog post in which he showed close-ups of the molars of Probanignathes. The guy who was a breatharian, who thought that maybe eating was an option. You didn't have to. That Raw Matt. The guy who put a Proceedings of the Library of Science header on an article that he had submitted to that journal, but had not had published yet, thereby committing academic fraud. That's the guy that Matt Powell likes to refer to as Dr. Raw Matt.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, is that what PLOS actually stands for?
Yeah, it's Proceedings of the Library of Science.
You know, it's sometimes the acronym just takes a life on its own. You forget. I never knew that's what it.
I had to look it up, honestly, when I first started covering that.
We've tried to publish in PLOS, haven't.
Hey, look, it's not an easy journal to get into. And here's a pro tip to Raw Matt on the off chance that he watches. First, you need to meet the style guidelines in order for your paper to even be considered. Pro tip, all of your text being center justified doesn't meet the style guidelines.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the question is, how do we hand our faith down? So this was kind of a long-winded setup, but I'm just giving context. Is how do we hand our faith down to the children and yet give them a chance to hear the other side? And I haven't quite figured that out, but I think Nathaniel Jeanson, I'd like to have a conversation with him. So let me just say this. The creationists, and especially the younger creationists I know, about a third of them are homegrown, like they were lifelong young earth creationists. About a third are like me. We weren't. I was raised in the public schools, in a Catholic home, and it wasn't a big deal that I learned evolution in the schools. That's what, as long as I got the grade, my parents didn't care what I learned. And in fact, it was much later in life, my mom got horrified when she was asking me, what did I do for work for Dr. Sanford? I said, well, we're fighting evolutionary theory. And then I described evolutionary theory. She said, that's what they taught you? And I said, yes, Mom. So I'm just saying that was my background. And about a third are of that variety. And about another third, I don't know what the story is. Okay. So, and these are, again, this is kind of anecdotal, just based on the friends. So when I go to these creation conferences, I'll ask, where do they come from? So and I think this is public knowledge, John Sanford, myself, Rob Carter have a similar story. Someone like Nathaniel Jeanson and some other people were homegrown yaks. So what I found is there was value in having come from the other side, because, you know, I had a chance to hear the other side. Whereas I think some of these kids, they you know, they just don't know what they're up against. And if you're a young earth creationist parent and you want your children to be that way, it's like, you know, at some point they have a mind of their own, and they're going to decide what they're going to believe in. You can't insulate them. So maybe the thing to do is to think about how to convey to them what you believe, and then give them a chance to hear the other side. I haven't quite figured out how to do that. So, like, even more basic than creationism, let's say I want to impart Christianity to the kids. I'll tell them this is what I believe is true. This is the Bible. This is what it says. But you know, at some point they're going to hear the other side. And how do we teach them that there are other viewpoints than Christianity? They're going to encounter it. It's like, okay, you're going to, if you tell them they need to go out there and witness, they're going to encounter people with different viewpoints. And I've heard of missionaries that go out there on the field thinking they're going to convert, and they're the ones that end up being deconverted. So the one thing I got out of tonight was there's definitely a way not to do it. So I'm not saying I figured out how to do, you know, to give
but
the
don't
faith.
do it the Ace way.
Yeah, don't do it the Ace way. Oh my goodness.
I can agree with you there. If you're trying to get people to believe in Christianity, don't give them the accelerated Christian education spiel, because that's not going to work.
The bird evolved from the octopus one.
Oh man, that's worse than like Matt Powell's octopi came from space thing. Because no, that I hated everything about that whole paragraph. Sorry, just keep going, Sal.
Well, you know, and there are all sorts of the English was just terrible, or their reasoning. They're saying, you know, they're talking about mutations or whatever. It's like, don't do that. So I haven't quite figured this out, because, you know, it's easy for me to kind of give the other side when I'm talking to, you know, I give talks to secular college students and even professors. So it's just very natural to say, okay, this is what the current theory is. I would just actually I'll give them the peer-reviewed paper. Yeah, it's boring and all, but yeah, you know, I actually do present the other side. It's because I'm trying to critique it. I don't know how to translate that down to the younger levels, you know, to the younger ages, because I have such a mindset. Okay, this is what I believe. And there are days I struggle to believe it, and it's problematic. And I was just thinking today, you know, how do I tell a kid? It's like, yeah, I believe in young earth creationism, but there are all these problems. That would be my conscience would bother me if I didn't say, I haven't solved this problem, little one. You know, maybe you will, but I got a level with you. I haven't figured it out. And I know you're going to ask me, you know, what are you going to, you know, Daddy Sal, what do you do with this problem when
Sal, that's not our relationship. I'm not going to call you Daddy Sal, just saying.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just giving a hypothetical here.
I know, and I'm just being needlessly obtuse. Sorry.
Okay. So I mean, I was just thinking, how would I do that? Because my conscience would bother me if I told him that, oh, this is so airtight, you know, only someone that's just wanting to sin all the time would disbelieve it. That wouldn't be true. Because that's why we have creationist researchers, because there are problems we're working on, but yet also convey to them that we still believe it despite the problems. And maybe that's where I would have to be forced to leave it. because they're eventually going to find out. And it doesn't take long, because a Christian mother one time came up to me, and I think she was having like a fourth or fifth or sixth grader. She said, "How do you know that the sun is young, or the fossil record or whatever?" And I was like, yeah, this is kind of good. How can I boil this down and give all my reasons without being verbose? I'm just like, this is really hard. And so I was flattered that Steve said, yeah, you need to write the curriculum. It's like, yeah, I need to have some conversations with people like Nathaniel Jeanson. I want to find out how he was taught. And on some level, it's almost easier to deal with a child that was raised in a home where they were not taught young earth creationism. I know that may sound horrible, but the state of what I've heard, like that ACE curriculum is so bad. I'm just like, when they go to college, they're going to lose their faith, because they'll feel like that they've been lied to, that they've been told that evolution has no good arguments, or that old earth has no good arguments. The sun's source of energy is not fusion, and fusion's a myth. Solar fusion's a myth. I mean, it's just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was
yeah,
bad. I mean, we can look. There are pictures taken in terms of neutrino emissions of the sun's core conducting nuclear fusion. This is not a question we have to ask anymore. And yet, ACE is like, it's probably gravitational collapse or something. It's definitely not fusion. No. That's not a viable option anymore.
So, I have some thinking to do about this. How, not that I would write that curriculum right now, but it is important to me, because, these Christian mothers will call. I mean, a few years ago, a Christian mother said, "Can you explain Noah's flood to my kids?" And just like, I don't know how. I mean, not to a kid. I'm used to talking to professors, and it's like, oh wow, that's kind of different. Trying to explain it to a kid versus a professor. It's actually easier to talk to professors, because you don't have to teach them, about some of the basics. But how do I tell a kid, why I believe Noah's flood is real, and then also convey the problems with the young Earth model? And then convey to them why I still believe it. And in case people are wondering why I still believe it, is I personally feel the trend of information has been favorable to the young Earth creation model, meaning 50 years ago you didn't have the caliber of people like John Gideon Hartnett and or any number of names, and in the 40 years, I'm seeing people like Nathaniel Jeanson and Joe DeWeese, who have co-authored. Vanderbilt PhD, he's publishing in top tier journals, and it's like, this is not, the generations of creationists before were not, I was not seeing them in secular academia like I do now. Change 10 is an example, Rob Stadler, and I'd say that's the momentum that keeps me going, is because I continue to meet these kind of people and more of them each year. I'm just like, I can't believe you got a PhD and you're a young earth creationist. And there's some names I can't name because there are, they're in sensitive positions in secular universities, but they have graduated from the top tier schools in the United States. So Original Nilsson.
I believe that's how you say it, yes. Tell it like a story, and then tell them the science behind it. At the most basic level, kids can pick this stuff up. My young son loves geology.
Wow.
Hey, geology is surprisingly cool. I'll be honest, until recently, I knew basically nothing about geology. And then I started talking with some actual professional geologists, and I was like, oh, so rocks are not lame, huh? Rocks are actually kind of cool. And it turns out, yeah, rocks are kind of cool.
Well, I didn't really have, I mean, I don't want to have to regurgitate the ACE curriculum, which is the topic of like the 2-hour show. And I don't want to waste people's time on it because it really was.
Go subscribe to NonSequitur and watch that after if you haven't seen it already.
So, it's kind of hard to say, do we have highlights because they're actually lowlights. So,
well, I think a general highlight could be that it remained a civil, friendly conversation the whole way through. It didn't have to devolve into a yelling match because we didn't all agree. Because look, we had an old Earth intelligent design guy. We had, basically 4 mainstream science people. And we had a young Earth creationist. And it did not turn into a shouting, vitriolic dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And I think that in and of itself is noteworthy because, quite frankly, a lot of conversations surrounding creationism end up as dumpster fires. So,
and the answer to this question is yes, but there are more. I mean, there are people I can't name. All right.
Lord Have Mercy sounds like a very Eastern Orthodox account, based on both the name and the profile picture, and I want confirmation of that in the chat. Lord Have Mercy, are you Eastern Orthodox?
So, I don't know where did we leave off? I was.
You're asking me, man.
I'm having kind of a Joe Biden moment. I'm sorry, you're not political. I'm very.
No, man. Hey, look,
political.
Joe Biden has his moments. The fact that I'm not going to say to what degree I agree or disagree with him politically doesn't mean that I'm not going to acknowledge the fact that he trails off like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point I was getting.
Oh, I was right. He is Eastern or he or she, I don't know, is Eastern Orthodox. I called it. I'm taking that as a win.
Man. You're good.
Look, man, he had the picture. Okay, look, first, Lord Have Mercy is something that gets said sometimes 40 times in a row in Eastern Orthodox liturgies. So there's that. Plus, he has a picture facing up in an Eastern Orthodox church towards the Pantocrator icon. It's not hard to call if you know even vaguely anything about Eastern Orthodoxy to call that one. But I'm going to claim it as a win, though. So it's Lord Have Mercy. I've never met you before, but it's nice to have you. And it's always nice to have some non-Catholic, non-Protestant representation. Because one of the things I feel like a lot of people forget is just how diverse Christianity is. And one of the groups they always leave out is the Eastern Orthodox. There's like, forget about them. So okay. I like to not forget about the Eastern Orthodox.
I recovered what I wanted to say, but before I get to it, Bent asked, is it okay to say, let's go, Brandon? So I'll tell you why it's okay for me, at least. Because, let's see, I live in Woodbridge, Virginia. That's no secret. And guess where the Brandon, his hometown is? It's here in Woodbridge, Virginia. He may be down the street from me for all I know.
Well, good for him. And I hear he's doing well in NASCAR.
Yeah. So let's go, Brandon.
Well, then I would say, at least in the non-ironic sense, yeah, good job, Brandon.
I'm
going to stay out. I'm going to stay out of the political version of that. But yeah.
So yeah, that's okay. In fact, if you see one of the thumbnails on the upcoming shows, if you peel back, you'll see a picture of him in his, carrying his crash helmet. Yeah, I was celebrating his victory.
I mean, look, he's the hometown guy, right?
So,
you grew up a few miles from Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, that's kind of good. Hey, Bent, I'm really glad he didn't get to you, brother. So,
my life would be significantly different.
Yeah.
Bent and I go back a long ways. We were in the Navy together.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's one point in the show, it seemed like I was conceding. And then they got to the point there where they said evolution is a false theory. And I said, they shouldn't say that, but I will agree. That's what I want to teach. So I finally put my foot down, and they're saying, well, what about all the problems with Yek? And my counter was there are a lot of problems with evolutionary theory. And I gave kind of my case, and Steve was like, I never heard that before. Just like that, I'm trying to introduce it in the Yek community because they don't know how to argue. Mm-hmm. And so when you say, the thing that they make a mistake of is you'll point out all the problems and they'll try to just give you a stupid answer back. And it makes no sense to me. And I'm just like, you just made our side look bad. The responsible thing to do is to say, I don't have a solution for that. It's problematic. And that's it. You'll be more respected for that answer than throwing up BS. For the scholars out there who are actually in university studying this stuff, they'll know BS. Okay? You might be able to pull that sort of wool over a certain crowd, unfortunately. And so that was the only time that there was, I wouldn't even say it's a confrontation, but I actually did stand up for the X and say, I personally think it's evolutionary theory is false, and I used to be an evolutionist. So that was about the only drama of the channel, where we actually expressed our disagreements, but it was in a civil way. The only problem was because there's like a 1 second delay in the audio. We couldn't tell when we're talking over each other, but that was it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I don't like about vMix is it introduces a lot of audio. And I want to say one thing real quick out loud that I typed in chat, which is, hey, if you're Eastern Orthodox and you follow the old calendar, Christ is born because it's still Christmas for the old calendar. It is currently the...
Does that mean I could say Merry Christmas?
I think it's the 4th day of Old Calendar Christmas. Yeah, you can totally say Merry Christmas to all the Eastern Orthodox Christians who follow the Old Calendar.
Merry Christmas, my Eastern Orthodox brothers. Merry Christmas.
There you go.
Merry Christmas.
As Lord have mercy says, I'm on a roll. Yeah, I know a thing or two about Christian history, believe it or not. I have a history degree.
You know a lot, and I would like to point to our discussion of the early church fathers.
Where I use the apostolic fathers and whatnot.
And this is where I saw kind of unfortunate tribalism. I saw some people here. It's like, if Dapper's on your channel, we're going to hate everything he says. They're calling you diaper, whatever. I'm sorry to even repeat it.
Oh, it's fine. Look, one of the jokes that I have with some of my science friends, I guess as you call them, the sort of pro-evolution crowd, is how bad of a nickname DapperDino is compared to a lot of other much more offensive, much better ones. We have a whole list of better ones that I won't even say because a lot of them are much, much harsher and they're much better.
And seriously, thank you, because I do try to keep this a family-friendly channel.
I do the same, so I get it.
But you did raise my curiosity. You said there's a Christian evolutionist on your channel that criticizes Bent. You said her name was Fran or something, or
so Benthoven, no relation, is one of my regular co-hosts, and frankly, Maddie, that's her YouTube handle, or not YouTube. That's her Twitter handle.
Maddie.
Yeah, and her YouTube channel is Science Side Up, and she's a Christian.
Science.
And she comes on. Science Side Up. She's she's a meteorologist. That's her profession.
How do you spell her last name? Frankly Maddie?
So frankly, FranklyMaddie on Twitter. And her channel is Science Side Up. I believe that's all one word. And it's like a take on Sunny Side Up, like the eggs.
Oh, because I thought I saw her.
Yeah.
And, I'm glad you clarified, because I was like, here's another lost soul. I'm sorry to say that,
Oh, frankly, Maddie she's very vocal about her Christian faith. I mean, that is not a secret.
Wow. That's my confession. Even I sometimes will stereotype people. And I've got to
be careful about that.
And I have to confess here, Benthoven, I thought you were an atheist until you said you're a Christian.
No, Benthoven, as long as I've known him, has been a Christian.
Yeah, I apologize, brother. So when you said that you're a Christian. I was just like, wow, I'm so delighted to hear that. And you'd come to my channel and you offered condolences for my my mother's passing. And so
yeah, actually, I gotta say, we were all everyone I know on YouTube who's sort of in my like circle were really we were really sorry to hear about that, man. It was it hit all of us, honestly, because we're all pretty big fans of you. Like, look, we disagree with you, but unlike some other people on this platform, you're someone who's a stand-up guy as far as we can tell. And like that's a big contrast to a lot of other young earth creationist channels out there. Because there's a lot of young earth creationists out there who are just terrible human beings, independent of our disagreements on science.
Well, you know, unfortunately, YouTube just seems to get the worst.
I agree, and I feel like you and I are trying to buck that trend. And I feel like it's sometimes it feels futile, but other times I feel like we're doing a good job. And also, I'm currently flipping through my copy of the Apostolic Fathers, and mostly I'm looking at the difference between English titles and original titles. Like, how come my English title says Barnabas? My Greek title says the letter of Barnabas. Come on, guys.
Yeah. Well, you know, just so people understand, one reason I am on YouTube, it was actually a way I could get editorial review.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't just that I was like a lot of YouTubers just trying to get as many viewers and subscribers. That, you know, that's just kind of how it goes. And so sometimes the people that are really outrageous get a lot of views, and the people that are scholarly, it's like you'll just put your audience to sleep. And I fall kind of in the latter category, and I'd like to be that way. I'll tell you another reason why. I get enough mail. I don't get a lot, but it's enough from people wanting to talk to me and all. And just like, you know, if my YouTube subscribership multiplies by 4 or 5, and the emails, my email traffic multiplies by that much, I think it would kill me.
Stay small.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, yeah, it would feel good to have a larger subscriber base, but I really don't want to build relationships that way with people. It's not that I don't love people. It's actually because I do, that when people write me, I feel very, very obligated to write them back and try to be thoughtful. And, you know, if I get 50 emails a year, that'll consume time. If I start getting 500 and I spend an hour for each, that's going to just kill me, you know? So where I was headed with that is, you know, again, YouTube just tends to cultivate shock jocks. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's what gets views. It's sad, but like, I don't know. What are you going to do?
Yeah. It's the Howard Stern phenomenon, you know? So anyway, this was a productive conversation. You know, if the audience feels like there's not a lot of resolution on, and we didn't really say anything that is new and profound, or we've come to some conclusion, at least for me, I'll say that, you know, it's made me think about how to convey the faith to others when I don't have all the answers. Because that's what I'm wrestling with. You know, I'll say that I'm a Christian, but I don't have all the answers. And it's like, yeah, I'm just like a little kid. I'm just trusting in something I don't have all the proof for. And I think that might be where I just have to convey that to the children, because Jesus said, you know, the little children, that's how you enter the kingdom of God. And that's kind of uncomfortable to say, you know, because I'm in an environment where you're always looking for evidences and reasons. But sometimes when it boils down to it, sometimes you just have a lot of I don't knows, but I believe, or I'm trusting a certain path. And I think there's a lot of decisions in life where we don't have most of the time we have less facts than we'd like to have to make a major decision. And we just we know we're going to be forced to commit. Because as I said,
I almost always wish I had more facts for any decision that I've ever made. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I say, the casino of life is forced on you. That means, unlike real casinos, brick and mortar casinos, which I used to play in, you had the choice whether to enter the bet or not. But in life, you're forced to play some hands that you're dealt, whether you like to deal with that hand or not. You're going to have to make a decision. And as you just said, so few times we have as many facts as we'd like to have. And I think that's the one thing I could say now. You've helped me articulate. Jordan Peterson was really good at saying, when you have conversation, you extend your thought process. You actually think better when you talk with someone else for certain things. And I just realized that's what I can say. If I were trying to teach kids that are a little bit more mature than an 8th grader, that might be the speech of the high school kid who's like a junior or senior, and say, you'll be faced with decisions where you don't have as many facts. You'll have to decide where you're going to put your faith in, and that'll be kind of scary. Sometimes in retrospect, you'll realize you trusted in something that wasn't good, and that's just the way it plays out. So, Dapper has to say goodbye, and I probably will check out soon. I'd like to welcome everybody who's come over from the NonSequitur channel and
Absolutely
given me a chance to speak.
subscribe to Sal. Do that.
Oh, thank you.
And if you're coming from Sal's channel and you haven't subscribed to the Non-Sequitur Show, go check that out, because they're going to be having more conversations like the one we had, as well as about a whole other bunch of topics. Like they're going to be talking about nuclear accidents. There's going to be more talk about creation evolution. There's going to be all sorts of stuff. So if you're interested in controversial topics that are discussed for the most part in a polite and civil way, I can't say there won't be any dumpster fires, but that's not what they're focusing on. So if that's a thing that's, you want, then go subscribe. Also, if you support, people who have been the victim of, breach of contract, or who have been a victim of fraudulent conversion, or who have had people try to submit forged documents against them in court, or people who've been a victim of people who lied under deposition, then again, that's a good channel to support, because all of that has happened against the current owners of that channel. So, there's a whole bunch of reasons to go subscribe.
And please visit DapperDino's channel. Feel free to subscribe to his channel. And in the spirit,
I try to be polite.
Yes, it is valuable to hear the other side. Tomorrow I'm going to be on Dr. Dan's channel, Creation Myths. You can ask me anything. So feel free to subscribe to the Non-Sequitur Show channel and DapperDino's. And
look, if you only subscribe to channels run by people who agree with you, you're not challenging yourself, and that's a disservice to yourself.
So finally at the end of the show, it just dawned on me. I think I have a better idea how to teach the kids. Nice. And what to say, and say that, when you commit to the faith, what it means to have faith and trust, it doesn't mean you have all your proofs. But as you go through life, I'm going to entrust you to the Lord to tell you, to show you the way, because I won't be there. You'll have to figure it out for yourself, and that's just part of the journey. And that's probably about all I could say. I think because what happened tonight, I was thinking, I struggle with my faith a lot. I mean, that's actually one reason I became a researcher in these areas, because I just wanted to know. And I said, I wanted to settle it, at least for my satisfaction. And so some people think I was a crusader. It's like, well, definitely that. But I think fundamentally, I went on the quest for my own personal needs. And, each person finds that of their own. And So I have to think through these thoughts, and I'd like to thank everyone who joined us. And I think I might have an after show tomorrow after I talk to Dr. Dan. So
all the after shows.
Huh?
I said all the after shows on Sal's channel.
Yes.
All
yes.
of them.
So anyway, take care, you all. Dapper, I'll meet you briefly backstage for like a minute or so to say goodbye. Oh, I wanted to say, now I remember what I wanted to say. On the NonSequitur Show or Steve McRae's channel, he has informally invited me to come back there and to argue and to present my case for young Earth creationism. You'll also hopefully get to see Cindy Lincoln there. And that, that's another way to support her, just to come out and hear her side of the story. So with that, take care. God bless you all. Good night.